So Dave, we've been talking about Power BI for a little while and decided we would shoot a couple of videos, kind of a Power BI for dummies, if you will. And I wanted to start out to let everybody know Power BI is something we don't just use in our time series data evaluation for our customers, we actually use it ourselves. And actually, I'm using it to measure your effectiveness with me, right? So I'm joking, but we are actually looking at our website, right? So I pull in Google Analytics as a data source, and I just refreshed it right before we talked. So this year I can see that we've had more visits. I'm looking at, most popular pages, most popular blogs, and matter of fact, one that I just released last week about are you really ready for a remote workforce, part 1 culture, has already gotten 69 views. One of the things that I really want to show you is a customer example. And I want to ask you a couple of questions too to talk about this. So here we have a customer, they have a particular process, and what they're trying to figure out really is capacity. They're trying to really figure out where they have capacity and where they don't. So they can either choose to bring on a whole new piece of equipment, or they can just turn on a booster pump and get an incremental change in one of their existing pieces of equipment. One of the things they're really trying to understand and be able to very quickly answer the question of is if we turn on a particular booster pump somewhere, what do we get out of it? Versus what do we get if we bring on a whole new piece of equipment with or without a booster pump, right? So they're trying to figure that out just from an overall capacity standpoint. What we did is we looked at all of the different assets that they have. I did an hourly average of flow out of those assets. What you're seeing here basically is every hourly average rolled up as a daily average right now, okay? That's what this line graph is. It's the 24-hour hourly averages averaged out to kind of get an idea of what's happening. Some of the things, we're looking at this for basically a little over 2 years, okay? And we're able to get some statistics on what's the average flow, the maximum flow, what's the standard deviation, and then also what is the flow with it running or with it off. So Dave, understanding that that's what we're doing here, in your past life, you've done some data analysis before. How would you have attacked something like this?
In my past life, I would generally do this with Excel, and it would be pulling all of this data that we see, probably waiting for Excel to do some lockups. And then after going through that, doing some lookups, doing some math, and taking an awfully long time every time I would go through to try to figure out if I need to turn a booster pump on or if I need to turn a second pump on. And quite honestly, by the time we could have made that decision in Excel, we probably would have missed the window of opportunity and would have had to already make a decision as to what we're going to do.
Probably so. And honestly, I was actually guilty of that. I was actually did my first couple of analyses on this problem in Excel. And then it dawned on me, a lot of these questions they really want to know are going to be big picture, and they're going to want to know it at any time, right? And if you remember my Lighthouse video, I talked about how a lot of times engineers will build these cool tools in, say, Excel or something like that, and they write all these macros and get all this cool stuff done in Excel, and then somebody figures out they're really smart. They either get promoted outside the company or they get promoted within the company. And then all of a sudden, whoever backfills them may not necessarily know about the solution, or if they see it, they look at it and it's like, oh gosh, I can't figure out what they did. I'm going to redo it to answer the same question, right? And so what we're really trying to do is figure out how can we build them something that they can look at, that anybody can use. Literally, if you can hit refresh and you can use these slicers, or change the date times, you can use this solution, right? It's really, that simple. So that's one of the reasons why we've really fallen in love with this tool. And really, I think the key is to get the underlying analytics right and get the extract, transform, and load process right. We're using, this is a Pi system underneath. We're using their integrator for business analytics. So basically, it's dropping these hourly averages once an hour out to a SQL database for us, just putting it in a row column format for us to be able to consume. That way, we're not bombing the Pi server for millions of rows of data. We're literally offloading it to a SQL database and then sucking it in. What we've also been able to do is add some columns, like, a lot of times you get a timestamp, which is month, date, year, hour, minute, second, right? Well, the nice thing is they built in this tool, it's an extract, transform, and load tool, is they built ways to say, hey, I want to segment out the month, the day, the year, the week, the hour, the minute, the second, etc. So I can use those to kind of slice and dice the data. So my point here is that really you can use any time series data source, and if you build a good ETL tool, if you're not a Pi customer, we can build you an ETL tool that uses these kinds of things, and we can do these same kind of analyses. The idea is I want to be able to hit the refresh button and it goes and gets me all the data, and then that way I'm analyzing the data, not spending all my time getting the data. One of the ways we have used this tool is I had to build a display that had multi-states for each of these pieces of equipment on it, as to whether or not it was within its target range of production that we would expect. Well, what I had to do was figure out what's a reasonable target. If I look at this, I can actually take right now, like I told you, I have this down to the day, but if I want to get it all the way down to the hour, I can change this to timestamp mode, okay? Now this will get me all the raw data, right? All the hourly averages that I calculated. And if you look, like right here, we had a peak, back say on August 27th of 19, and then it dropped, and then it rose, and then it dropped. Well, that's a process that they do that we know about, where they're trying to increase the flow, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that this thing moves around a lot and it stops a lot and things of that nature, we really were trying to figure out, well, when does it perform the best? So that way we can figure out what is the target. And I even had the question with the customer is, should our target be at the top of the peak? Or should it be somewhere in the middle? Should it be at the bottom? Where should the target be? And what we chose was the middle, right? That's kind of where we want it. So if I go back here and I go back to this date hierarchy, I want to show you how this looks. It doesn't look the same as it did, right? What this has done is taken all those hourly averages and rolled them up to a year value. So in other words, this is the average of all the averages for 2018, 2019, and whatever we have into 2020, the 4.5 months into 2020. But now if I want to start drilling down, further into this, let me get rid of this view recovered files thing. I can actually use this expand down one level in the hierarchy, drill down. Now it goes down by quarter, okay? And now if I click it again, it goes down to the month. So now I have a monthly average, right? So think about how I would do that in Excel. That was usually not a real easy trick. I mean, you could kind of do it with some pivot tables and pivot charts, but it wasn't that easy, right? And this just comes inherently once you drop the timestamp onto a line graph. This functionality just comes, right? And then I can, drill back up as well. So what I actually did was I said, the best performing time, it seems like, was from about November of 2018 to about March of 2019. So then I could change, my slicer. Whoops, didn't get 11 there. And then do 3/31, 2019. Okay, so there's my best, performing, long section of time. And look, my average flow for that was 8.44. So now what we can say is, if you're really running this thing pretty well, you should expect about 8.5 units of production out of it, whatever that unit is. So now I can use that as my target. And so what I did was I built a multi-state that says, hey, if I'm within 10% of that, then I'm gonna not change the color of the dot that shows if it's running well. If you're between 10 and 20% below that, it'll turn yellow, and if you're below 20% below that number, you're going to turn it red. So now they can look at a screen very quickly and say, oh, all these assets are red, and oh, by the way, 5 of the 6 of them don't have their booster pump on. And maybe that's why they're red, because as you see, if you look, we get about half the production if we have the booster pump off, right? And so really, let's go back to the whole data set again real quick. And if you look at this, I set up a couple of cards here. That's what this graphic is. And I set up a filter on it that says, hey, the run indication for the booster pump, if it's true, give me the average of the flow for the entire data set that I'm looking at. So as I slice it, that number changes based on the data that I'm looking at. So if they want to look and say, well, hey, look, we did a bunch of repairs on that piece of equipment. Really, we need to just look at the last 2 months. They can go do that and see what the difference is, right? And then I did the same thing where the run indication is false. So that way they can know, what the difference is. And so I built them a page for each asset so they can do this kind of an analysis. And then I even did a couple of different ways to look at it for all their equipment. What's the average flow? What is it with and without the booster? And then I stacked them just so they can see it a little bit better. The blue is with and gray is without. So that way they can get some kind of an idea really quickly, which ones are performing, which ones aren't, and how much they can reasonably expect if they turn on a booster, or if they turn on a new asset with or without a booster. They can kind of say, hey, I need about 10 more units of production. Well, where do I have about 10? Well, I can turn this one on right here without the booster and I get 10.5. Close enough. Let's do that one, right? It's not running right now. So really, it gives them the ability to ask and answer those questions for themselves without having to come to us, and really allows them to go really drill through the data very quickly. And if their engineers change out, I think they can figure out how to use this tool.
I think that this is amazing. I've really enjoyed the cards. That's like the second thing that my eyes are drawn towards when we pulled this open. And I really like the just large, simple number of with booster pump running, with booster pump off. And it goes up and down based off of the timestamps, and it allows people to make a really easy decision in all of the graphs. And I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked you before, Jim, but how isn't everyone using Power BI for their data analytics?
I think really it's a lack of education. Like there's a lot of people that are using Power BI for relational type data, but they don't think it's useful for time series data or time series data aggregation. And that's why we wanted to shoot this series. Is the engineers that I have shown this to almost immediately.
So Jim, I know that I've asked you this question before, but you said that you guys at Industrial Insight offer training for people if they want to get started on a business intelligence tool, correct?
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We definitely offer training. We're big believers in teaching our customers how to fish, right? You know, we post that a lot, you know, fishing Fridays and stuff like that. But one of the things I'd love to do is teach people how to fish, right? And then they catch a fish, you know, on their own, and there's that joy, right? My youngest son, who's 15, just caught a 9.5 pound bass out of our pond in our back behind our house, you know, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, right? And the joy in watching him do that, knowing I taught him how to do that, was way more than if I had caught it myself and handed him the rod, right? And so, you know, I'm a huge believer business-wise as well to teach our customers how to fish. So we try to teach people a lot of the techniques that we use, you know, as much as we possibly can. So with business intelligence, you know, we learn them, you know, a lot through some of their self-directed and self-guided learnings. You know, they both Tableau and Power BI have great learning channels. The problem is you have the data sets they give you are not typically the ones that are time series in nature. And there's some tricks that we've learned in analyzing time series data and time series data aggregations that can really make your life a lot better. And so, yeah, by all means, contact us. I mean, there's several of us that are very proficient, you know, with both Power BI and Tableau, and we can definitely teach you, you know, how to use these tools effectively to analyze your time series data.